We're now going to talk about the purchase order module. You saw in a previous chapter that we went and converted a quote to a job and then ordered the parts. So there is a separate module just for purchase orders. And if we go and have a look at our order, this is the order that we created. The order is for a supplier, and someone's going to pay. We have to bill to somebody, so we have to pay some. So this is who we're going to pay, who placed the order and when the order is required by, if there's any particular location that we want the goods to be received in automatically into when we receive them, some various other values that aren't so important at this point in time. On the order we have then our ship to information, we have our payment type and payment details of how we're going to pay this particular order, and any comments that we want to place on this order. We then go down to the order items, where we can go and add as many items as we like onto this order for the supplier. Once we've gone and put all the items on the order, we can then go and dispatch the purchase order to the supplier. We can go and dispatch the order to the supplier by email or whatever method we go and dispatch our orders to the supplier. So the supplier then eventually goes and delivers the goods, and so we need to then receive those goods in to stock. So we can go then into our receive items function, and I am skipping a lot of information here. There's our line item. We can type in our supplier invoice that came with the goods, if it came with the supplier invoice, mind you. We can then go and say, right, automatic, we received exactly what we expected to get with the costs we expected to get. That's not always the case, mind you. I can now go and receive these items in, and you'll see now that it's got a receive date here against that item. If I then go and view the job and go to our job details, you'll find now that we now have some actual parts on this job, which we didn't have before, because it's going to receive those parts in onto the job itself. And that is the very simple part of purchase orders, but unfortunately in the real world it's rarely as simple as that. And so there are some nuances in the purchase order module that you may want to consider. And if we go and have a look at, first of all, the detail of a particular item, we have the part number, the description, where we want that item to end up going, what location it's going to go into. We have our quantity ordered and our cost ex tax. If we have any discounts from the supplier, we can apply it here. Now when I create this, receive this in, as you saw, it put the part onto the job. So I can also over here influence what the sell price will be of that part when it goes on the job. It could be a percentage markup on cost. It could be just the fixed price that we already had in the job itself when we added the part to the job, or we could change that price if we wanted to over there. We can, there are individual tax codes for that particular item, as I mentioned. If we're purchasing from overseas or something, they may not have GST applicable to it. And very importantly, later on, is the cost center that will be updated with the value of stock for this particular purchase. So in this case, it's materials, but it could be labor, it could be various other different things. This up here is a very critical field to understand. And this determines how the goods physically get received. There are various options. The simplest one is we receive it into inventory, which simply means that after I receive this one unit of goods, it is received into inventory. The stock on hand in inventory will go up by 1, and the average cost in inventory will be recalculated, and the last cost will be reset. Okay. The next option along for that is to, and we have to remember that we are, I'll step back again. If I was ordering for stock only and there was no job numbers attached to it, that would be the only option that I have, receive into inventory. Okay, because I have this item linked to a job, we have some other options that we can choose. So the next one step up is receive via inventory update costs. What that means is that it will physically receive this item into stock, adjust the average cost and the last cost and so on, and then it will take it out of stock and put it on the job. And what the implication of that is that the cost of that item on the job will be based on inventory cost, whether it's the average cost or the last cost or the fixed cost or whatever. But it's not going to be the cost necessarily of this item as I purchased it. Okay? The next option on is assign actual purchase cost to job and bypass inventory. What this means is that it doesn't put it through inventory whatsoever. It still does a movement record that it came in and out, but it doesn't actually go into inventory. So this will go straight onto the job with the cost as it's purchased, straight onto here. And as I said, the average cost and fixed cost and whatever, the average cost will not be affected in the inventory itself. It just goes straight to the job. There's still a movement record, but it just goes straight to the job. A lot of people like to do that because if they're ordering for a job, they want the actual cost of it was for the job, and they don't want to really touch their inventory at all, as far as that's concerned. Final part, which is an enterprise feature, is called commitments, which I haven't really touched on at all yet, but I can receive this as committed stock. What that means is it goes into stock, but it's committed to the job. So if I have, let's say, 10 units in stock and I bring one in, I've now got 11 units in stock. I only still have 10 units available to be used by other people because one unit is committed to that particular job. Okay? And then at some point later, I can then go and fulfill the commitments and take it out of stock and put it onto the job itself. So that's an enterprise feature. So that's some of the detail we have when we create the part itself. When we do the receiving, on the other hand, I'll have to go and just add another part on there so I can, unless I've got another order here that I can, yeah, okay. When I do the receiving, on the other hand, there are other situations we need to deal with. In the real world, it's not so neat and clear every time that the goods come in and go straight on the job. Okay? There are 3 different scenarios that could occur. Number 1 is the goods could be received with the invoice. We're all happy, we know what the costs are, we can confirm all of that. Okay. The goods may be received before the invoice. So we only receive the goods with the delivery docket, we don't actually have the invoice yet. So we have to have the ability to separately receive the invoice in later. Why do we want to do that? Because we want to update the system with the actual cost of the goods as they were received. They may not match what you had on the purchase order, and therefore flow through and update the costs of the parts and all that sort of stuff. Or the other way around is the invoice may be received before you receive the goods, in which case we need to be able to get the invoice in, and that won't update anything. And then when the goods eventually are received, it will then go and match it up against the costs that were on the invoice and maybe show some red flags if they don't match up and all that sort of thing as well. The last scenario that we have, which has nothing to do with invoicing, is to do with back orders. Okay? We may partially receive. I may order 10 and they only sent us 3. So we need the ability to receive the 3 and have 7 outstanding that we're going to receive at a later time. So we handle all of that here within the receiving module. I won't show it to you now, but just understand that we can handle those sorts of things.
So if partial shipment, for example, it falls into the 3rd category you mentioned.
Correct. So the partial shipment will, if I order 10 and 3 arrive, it'll split that into 3 received, 7 unreceived,
okay,
as separate line items in there as well. The other thing is with serialized items at the point of receiving, it'll want me to go and enter by typing or barcoding or whatever the serial numbers of the items that have been received so that I can update the serial numbers in stock. It won't let me receive it unless I've actually entered all the serial numbers against those line items. There's some other minor things like we can print receipt labels, as we receive them automatically to stick on the goods, and there's ways of handling freight and that sort of a thing. So that's probably enough to show you about the purchase order side of things and receiving. The last part is the supplier invoice. I mentioned that we can receive in supplier invoices. So if I go back to my other order that I had, I'll just go and here, if I go into supplier invoice, you'll see that that's the order I received in before with the supplier invoice, and I have all the details about the supplier invoice, the invoice number, the totals and so on, which I can then reference against any order to see what the supplier invoices were. In my accounting post, it will then post that supplier invoice across into the accounting program for payment purposes. We don't have a full accounts payable system in TSM, but we do have a full accounts receivable system in TSM. Okay, we don't handle payments, supplier payments. The accounting program handles that.
It's integrated the accounting program.
In the accounting post integration, it handles that.